Hello and welcome to this video, which is about the Behringer X-Touch 1 and more specifically making it not frustrating in use in Cubase. So very quick story. I've previously used a PreSonus fader port for quite a few years now, and it follows what you're doing on screen. So whichever track you've got selected, the fader on that will be active, and it makes changing levels quick and easy to the point where I've got so used to doing it that if I'm in a studio without one, I find my left hand grabbing for a fader that isn't there and making adjustments that I can't make with it. So it's become a pretty inherent part of my workflow. However, I always wanted a bit more. I wanted a time display on it and better transport controls as well. The Behringer X-Touch 1 was the thing. I saw that, thought, yeah, this is great. This is going to be perfect. Set it up in Cubase as a Mackie control, as all these things tend to be, and basically used it for about half an hour, got frustrated with it and left it. And I will show you the reason why. So on screen, you can see I've got a Cubase project open. And if I click on any of these tracks, you can see the fader moving as we follow that. And that's fine, providing we're in this group of 8 here. So you can see these little highlights here, and these show which channels are currently in the Mackie's remit, as it were. As soon as I click on number 9, the fader goes to the bottom. And you can see that actually the fader isn't at 0, but these, it doesn't work for. You have to change bank. Now that sounds like a first world problem, and you can do it on the device itself. So if I press bank change here, you can see now we're on this set of faders, and now the faders come into action, etc. And now we can change these. But again, if we go back here, we're not active anymore. So we need to do that. This seems like a minor thing, but it totally breaks your workflow. And what I'm really about with a lot of this is getting to the point where you're not thinking about using a computer, you're just getting on with making music. And this really got in the way. That's why it went back in the box. However, it doesn't need to be that way, as you're going to see now. So the standard setup for this is that it's set up in Studio as a Mackie control. And we don't want to do that anymore. So I'm going to remove that. So as you can see, the Behringer, just like Bagpuss, has gone to sleep. And now we're going to use a custom script, which has been provided, link in the description. Bjorn has programmed this for the X-Touch, which has a master fader and 8 faders. I just thought it would be interesting to try to see whether it works with the X-Touch 1. And the version that I've done this with, which I've slightly modified as well, actually does work with the X-Touch 1. So that is what we are using here. So under MIDI Remote, I can connect this. And we've got the X-Touch script here with the GitHub link to the original creator. I can enable that. I will show you how to install this in a bit, but that will come up here. Now, we could change this. I spent some time trying to do this, but to be honest, I've got so little time at the moment that I could spend a month making this look more like it. But most importantly, this functions properly. So the controls on the X-Touch 1 nearly all work properly. I think they all do work properly, actually. But most importantly, whichever channel you click on screen, it reacts to. So you remember previously, we were in this block here, and you can see it's going between kick and so on. Now, when I clicked on hats, it didn't react, but you see it does work with this. So it kind of changes groups automatically. You get a little wipe of the fader, but ultimately it means if we click back here, we're straight back on that. We don't need to worry about it. So this works really well. All the other buttons and controls work. The time display works. There's a bit of a caveat with it. When you initially start a project, sometimes some of these figures don't appear, but generally they will catch up pretty well. I've basically started using this and have not thought about it since, because nearly everything that I want to do works. So we've got zoom, we've got cursor position, which isn't something that I use a lot, but it might be something you want to use a lot. We've got scrub, we've got normal navigation as well, which is controlled by this zoom setting here, in case you're wondering. And all of these buttons seem to work. Not all of them light up, but I'm not that worried about that, really. So you can certainly see that read and write, etc., seem to work okay. Nearly everything works, and certainly everything I'm concerned about works. The fader works, and the meter here works, which is quite nice. the channel name comes up. The colors aren't represented. I'm not that worried about that, but yeah, generally it all works. So if you're interested in this, in the next section, we'll look at how you can download it, where you can download it from, and how you can install it. So the link to download the file from my website is in the description, and it's a zip file for good reason, for a couple of reasons that you'll see. But ultimately, what you want to do is to find this zip file wherever you've downloaded it, and then you need to copy it to a specific place. Now, the place is different depending on whether you're Mac or Windows, but it's kind of the same. So in your Documents folder, which I think is My Documents on most versions of Windows, but it might be Documents now. So in your Documents folder, you should see a Steinberg folder. As you can see here, I've got quite a few different Steinberg products installed. You go into Cubase, and then from there, you go into MIDI Remote, and from there into Driver Scripts, and there you go into Local. And there, what you want to do is to put that zip file in there, okay? So once you've got that zip file in there, you need to unzip it so you get the contents out of it. So on a Mac, you just double click that, but on Windows, you might need to right click and then just do extract here. But that should give you a folder called Behringer. Now, this is important. It needs to be called Behringer. And then inside that, you'll see this folder, Xtouch1. And then inside there, you'll see the magic JavaScript file. You may or may not have a .js depending on your system settings, but I turn extensions on so I know what's going on. So looking at this entire local folder structure, you can see we've got the local folder there, and then we've got Behringer, Xtouch1, and then this file here. So that's the form you need. So we can see we've got these other Akai ones. I'll just close that up so we don't see that. I'm going to delete the zip file so it doesn't confuse matters. So with that, you should be good to go. So the important thing is you're in the Steinberg, Cubase, MIDI Remote, Driver Scripts, local folder, and then you unzip that. So inside that local folder, you should have Behringer, Xtouch1, Behringer, Xtouch1.js. So quite a long trail, but just follow it step by step and you should be good to go. So the next thing to do is to set this up in Cubase. So you need to get to the MIDI Remote tab of the lower zone. So if the lower zone's not open, you can open it here. And then click on MIDI Remote, and then open the MIDI Remote Manager. Now, depending on what's happened, you may have found that it's already active and good to go. But if it isn't, then you can go to Scripts here, and then click Reload Scripts. And my Behringer has just woken up, and you can see behind here, it's recognized it. So if we scroll down to the bottom of this window, what you should be seeing is Xtouch, Behringer, GitHub, and Bjorn's GitHub address here, and how many instances there are. We can see that's there. So if you need to, you can disable it, but then you should be good to go. So pretty much this should be an auto detection thing. I've checked this across Windows and macOS, and they both appear as the same thing because the way that Cubase detects what is connected is by the name of the MIDI port, and this fortunately is the same across both. So we should be okay. Called Xtouch1, etc. And then you should be good to go. Now, the thing is, you can ignore what's happening on here in terms of the display purely because this would need to be altered fairly radically. And because it's programmed initially in TypeScript and then it's sort of compiled to JavaScript, it's a bit of a head scratcher to me. And if I've got a spare week, I might get around to doing that. But to be honest, I'm more interested in the functionality of it. And with this now, it's just working, we're in business, and you should be good to go. So if you've got a Behringer Xtouch1, I would strongly suggest giving this a go because for me, it's transformed it from being something which was like nice but a bit annoying to being something which is usable every day. And I really don't think about it anymore. It's one of those wonderful pieces of equipment where it's just there, it just works, it does what I want it to. I don't have to think about it. I can get on with making music and so on. Here's a brief technical note at the end of the video. So there's a couple of things you may need to check and possibly change to get this working. So the first thing is the firmware version, which the Xtouch1 is on, and the second thing is the mode that it's running in. The firmware version should be the latest one, which is 1.10. Now, this has been around for a fair while because the Xtouch1 is fairly old, but yours might be on an earlier version. That might be a problem. The main Xtouch script relies on a different version, so the versioning between Xtouch1 and Xtouch are different So I think it's on a much bigger number on the X Touch, but there we go. 110 is what you're looking for, and you actually see this when you power it up. So if I just put the power on, you'll see very briefly on this display at the top, it says 110, and that's the version that it's on. If you need to update it, you'll need to go to the Behringer site to do that. It's pretty straightforward. I remember doing mine a long time ago. Now, the other thing you may need to check and change is the mode that it's running in. And to do that, power it down. Hold down the pan control, so press this button down, so don't turn it, but actually press it, you'll hear the noise. And then put the power in. Firmware version comes up, and then we get the mode that it's in. So it says MC Cub, it says CU, so it's got Mackie Control, Cubase, but we've got all these different modes we can go into. They vary slightly or greatly, depending on what they are, but MC Cub is what we're on. Some other scripts for this need a different mode, but that's what we need for this. If you press, again, you get to control the LCD contrast. I'll leave that about 50. Press that again, and you get to control the brightness of the LED display. So we can change that here. You can see it's getting darker or brighter, depending on your needs. And press it again, and you're done. So then you can just power it down, power it back up, and you should be good to go. So as ever, hope you found this video useful, and if you have, please like, comment, and even subscribe, and we'll see you again soon for more Music Tech Tuition.